when you bring up R. Kelly, and I know a lot of young Black boys and men went through this too. I remember being at the barber shop when I was a kid,
Mm,
and I saw that horrific tape
mm,
circulating in barbershops.
yeah.
And I was young. I was young. I mean, mind you, I was an Aaliyah fan, so when I heard about Aaliyah, I was done. So
Yeah,
I had
right.
been done since like '96. That was
Right,
just
right,
me.
right.
I was too crazy of an Aaliyah fan. But I remember that, and I couldn't really form it in my brain. Like, why is this being celebrated? Why am I
Mm-hmm.
a teenager seeing this in a barbershop? And I wanted to know if you could talk a little bit about the nuances of sexual assault and being silent in Black communities. I think it's so important to highlight that.
Absolutely. I think that, and I'm glad you used the word nuances because it is quite nuanced. On the one hand, we always talk about sexual violence in a very gendered way, as if it only happens to girls and only happens to women. Sexual violence is happens across the board, right? It does not it's not ascribed to one gender or another. So sexual violence in the Black community is rampant across the board. There's and when you let's start with children, right? A lot of times when people are saying me too and say that they have experienced sexual violence, we're talking about adult survivors of child sexual abuse. That is 1 in 10 children will experience sexual violence before they finish high school, right? We have to sit with real numbers, and that is happening exponentially inside of the Black community. Black women have the second highest rate of sexual violence experiences in this country, second only to Native women. And the
Mm.
thing that is different about Native women is that 80% of the sexual violence they experience happens by non-Native people. That's not true for Black or white or Latinx or Asian and other ethnic communities. So what we're looking at is high rates of sexual violence happening inside of our community that we are very silent about because on the other side, we are dealing with racial injustice, right? And racial oppression that has been at the forefront of our experiences for most of our lives, for all of our lives in this country, right? And so what we've been trained to do is put race first. And we know that Black people experience high rates of racial injustice, high rates of discrimination and racism and bias. And so a lot of times when Black women experience sexual violence, we have been trained over decades to be silent and to hold that pain for numerous reasons. Many times it's to protect the perpetrator. If it happens to be a Black man, because Black women experience sexual violence at the hands of other Black women. They experience the hands of, it's not all one category.
Mhm.
But a lot of times if a Black woman experiences sexual violence at the hands of a Black man, they're taught to be silent about it because we have to protect that Black man. Also, when Black boys experience sexual violence or Black men experience sexual violence, young men, at the hands of Black women, they are pumped up and taught to accept that as a
Mm.
rite of passage, as something
Right.
to be proud of, right? So in both instances, you have predators among us, male and female, who are preying on a lot of times young people, vulnerable people, who then the rest of the community is telling either to be silent in one way or another. Silent to protect your manhood, right? You saw a rash of rappers um, in recent years talking about things like losing their virginity at 6 years old or losing their virginity at 12 years old to adult women. Those women are predators, but we don't
Mm.
frame those as predators and we don't frame those relationships or those experiences as sexually violent because of the way that we talk about and think about masculinity, right? Or you have Black girls who are labeled as fast, right? Because think about when you were younger and you heard about the girl who was having sex, the girl who got pregnant at 13 or 14, and there's rumors about her and how fast she is and why she got pregnant. Oftentimes that pregnancy happened by an older man, right? But there's no indictment on the man who impregnated this child. So there are these stigmas that happen inside of our community that we have trained ourselves to be silent about for various reasons. And I think what I love about this generation of young folks is that they are breaking a lot of that. They're saying we won't be silent about that. We won't accept this. You won't make us, there's a lot of criticism of the young girls, like the young rappers being naked and
Hmm.
showing their bodies and things like that. And I'm older, and I lived through a cycle of this. I lived through it. I'm you know love hip hop, and I've seen the cycle of women in hip hop. And I've seen how folks who are my age, I remember when Kim came out. I
Oh
remember when
yeah.
Foxy came out. I remember when Adina Howard came out. I remember,
Yes.
like
Come
we
on
have
now.
short memories of how this evolved.
Yeah.
We were all screaming, "Put it in your mouth" in the club, and now we
Yeah.
complaining about the children. But there's something about the way the young people are embracing not just their sexuality. It's more than just their sexuality. It is bodily autonomy. It is a right to live in my body freely without and demand consent from other people who think that they have a right to my body. And that's really what this whole movement is about, right? Is that the people should have a right to live in their body with dignity and with autonomy.
I like to remind people, even when it comes with hip hop, absolutely women in hip hop. But I think about the way that Grace Jones was vilified for the way that she
Exactly.
was using her body.
Millie
Janet Jackson
Jackson.
was vilified. Oh, Millie Jackson, come on now. Like
Come
they
on.
were just, yeah,
Mhm.
vilifying these women for really, in comparison to some of the male artists,
Yeah.
minimal stuff. So I completely agree with you. So let me ask you this. There is also another nuance there when it comes to Black men, because as we all know, Black men suffer being wrongfully convicted or wrongfully accused 7 times more likely than any other racial demographic.
Mhm.
So when I have a lot of brothers call into the show, this is one of the things that they say, like, "Oh, what about being wrongfully accused?" What do you say to people, to Black men who have fears about? I mean, I think R. Kelly and Bill Cosby are clear, but
Yeah,
wrongfully accused.
I think those fears are warranted. I don't think that we are talking about the same thing. And I think this
Hmm.
is also why there's a rash of silence in our community. There's no denial, no clearly conscious Black person can deny the history of vilifying Black men, hypersexualizing Black men, and using sexual violence to weaponizing sexual violence against Black men. Right, from Emmett Till to the Central Park Five, we have seen it over and over and over again, where all you have to do is call the name of a Black man. I remember I wrote about this in my memoir. I remember when the Central Park Five case happened, there was another case happening in Boston. And a lot of people around my age will remember this because it was national news, where this white man had killed his pregnant wife, and the whole city of Boston shut down because he said a Black man did it. And they
Mm,
were kicking in doors in Black neighborhoods in Boston,
mm.
trying to find this mysterious Black man, just at the word of this white man saying that this Black man killed his wife, right? So we know that there is a long history of Black men being vilified and sexual violence being weaponized against them. You have to put two things can be true at the same time, though. And this is the thing that I keep trying to say to brothers. This is not about demonizing you all. One, because Black men are also survivors of sexual violence.
Absolutely.
Two, two things can be true. While it is true that Black men are often falsely accused of sexual violence, it's usually racially motivated, right? Which means it's happening from people outside of our community accusing people inside of our community of these crimes that didn't happen. The second thing is, while that is true, we still have this number that Black women have the second highest rate of sexual violence happening to them in this country. And oftentimes it's happening at the hands of Black men. That's not an indictment against all Black men. That is a conundrum that we as a family of Black people have to sit down and talk about. We have to unpack that. That doesn't mean that all Black men are that there's nothing about us and our community that says we have that we are depraved,
Mhm.
that we have some kind of violent tendencies or anything like that. But the numbers are what they are, right? And so when I say, I made this statement 4 years ago, 5 years ago about, why is it my job to go after white men on Twitter? And people were like, oh, because you just want to go after black men? No, I want
Mhm.
black people I want us to stop thinking about what white folks are doing. I want us to
Mhm.
stop thinking about what's going on in other communities. We have a problem inside of our community, and we have to talk about that, right? We have to talk about why Black women have such high rates of sexual violence. The other part and that's not just about Black men, it's also about law enforcement. We
Yes.
spent all of 2020 talking about, taking to the streets, talking about Black Lives Matter. We spent 2016, 2015, 2014 talking about Black Lives Matter, talking about police violence. Police brutality is the #1 complaint against police in this country. The #2 complaint is sexual violence. We don't go past #1, right? When we call the names, excuse me, we talk about Black Lives Matter and we talk about hashtags, we talk about all these men who died at the hands of the police. Black women have also died at the hands of the police. But you know what else Black women have? They've also been sexually assaulted at the hands of police. So it's not just when we're talking about what's happening to Black women in this country and Black femmes in this country around sexual violence, it's not just, I'm just trying to take down Black men. I'm talking about a serious problem that we have that's happening inside of our community. It's happening with law enforcement, and it's happening inside of our communities and in our institutions. If we could just take a step back and not feel like somebody's trying to get you. Nobody's trying to get you. R. Kelly is not representative of all Black men.
Mhm.
Russell
Mhm.
Simmons, Bill Cosby, these men are not representative of all Black men. And what I really wish that our brothers would do is say, they are not us.
Mhm. Mhm.
Because R. Kelly has been accused of these horrific things, which there's mountains of evidence for.
Yes.
Years and years of, y'all know
Yes.
he's guilty, right? Like
There's a
it's
marriage certificate.
this is
There's an
what I'm
actual
saying.
marriage
Like
certificate.
the fact that people want to go down with that ship is fascinating to me. R. Kelly does not. What I would love to hear brothers say is R. Kelly doesn't represent us. In fact, he doesn't represent the typical Black man. I have spent my life surrounded by amazing Black men. I'm married to an amazing Black man. I have an amazing brother, uncles, cousins, my brothers in community. Like I ride for Black men on a regular basis.
Yeah.
I know the strength and courage and tenacity and love and compassion that Black men have in our community. And I know that we have the ability, if we want to come together and have reasonable, rational conversations that can lead to reasonable, rational solutions. But we can't do that if we ignore that this is a problem. And this is a problem in our community. Forget Hollywood, forget headlines, forget all of this stuff you're reading about in the newspaper about Me Too and online about Me Too. Look at what's actually happening. Look at your churches, look at your schools, look in your community. This sexual violence in our community is a problem. And as long as we try to make it about these celebrities being taken down and these Black, that's not what it's about. It's about your neighbor, your little sister, your nieces, your little nephew. It's about the people around you. Talk to your auntie, talk to your grandma, talk to the women in your family and find out how much has happened and get real stories. And then I think that maybe we can have a different conversation, because we need to have a different conversation than the one we've been having for the last few years.
No, you're so right. And I know, I think that celebrity angle is so important. And oftentimes the people that you mentioned, they feed off of that. Like I can recall Bill Cosby released a statement comparing himself to Emmett Till.
Like, come on,
Bruh,
bro, you're
you
not
ain't
Emmett
Emmett. That's
Till.
disrespectful.
It's wildly
You ain't Emmett Till.
disrespectful.
That's terrible.
And we should be angry about that. That's what I'm saying. We should be angry about that. Why are y'all angry at me? Because I'm calling calling out a problem in our community. We should be closing ranks and saying, I want to keep my children safe. We talk about the Black woman being the center of the Black family all the time. We talk about how the Black family is being torn apart all the time. If that is true, we talk about Black Lives Mattering all the time. If that is true, then why can't we take a serious look at this thing that is tearing at the fabric of our families? I think that is part of it is, and this is why I do the work that I do and the way that I do it, right? Part of it is because people don't understand what sexual violence is and how it really affects survivors. There was a study that came out a few years that said, on average, survivors of sexual violence spend $122,000 over their lifetime to heal from what they experienced, from the trauma of it, right? And I remember when I got the study, I thought to myself, the first thing I thought to myself was, if they can afford it. So if you think about the top two people in this country, groups of people who experience sexual violence, Native women and Black women. Those are the top two groups of people who experience sexual violence in this country. Those are also the top two groups of people who have the lowest incomes in this country. So we know that Native women and Black women are not able to spend $122,000 over their lifetime to heal and pour resources into what happened to them to deal with the sexual violence they experience. So what do? They may turn to drugs and alcohol. They may turn to other forms of trying to find healing, because what our bodies do, there's a book called The Body Keeps the Score. Our body's going to keep the score. Our bodies have a need to heal. They have a need to try to get back to being whole. So what I'm saying is that sexual violence is connected, is inextricably linked to so many other issues in our community. It's connected to substance abuse and drug abuse. It's connected to crime, other crime. It's connected to mental health issues. All of these things, even down to just post-traumatic stress and how we have to handle that. And there's so many people in our community who are survivors on top of other forms of survival. I can name to you right now, just me, myself, Tarana. I've seen people die, get shot right in front of me, on top of being a survivor of child sexual abuse, a survivor of rape, a survivor of regular crime. I grew up in the Bronx. You think I've been chain snatched, robbed at gunpoint, been in shootouts, like just as an average, like just living, growing up. So we survive all of that type of violence, stopped by police, unjustly accused, all of those kinds of, I've dealt with all of that kind of stuff on top of my survival. That's what we're dealing with inside of our community. But we have cherry picked and decided one of those is not important.